My Wife the Metaphysician, or Lady Murasaki's Revenge. Section 4. I was enjoying my Dobos and coffee at Gerbeaud's. I was enjoying my Dobos and coffee at Gerbeaud's, watching the endless flaneurs in Murasaki Square, when a young woman stopped and asked in that instantly recognizable, infantilized valley girl voice whether she could share my table. I nodded chairwards. Out debouched her story. Her name was Brittany Bamberger, and she was from Sherman Oaks. To my surprise, the interrogative intonation on every declarative sentence and de rigueur bare midriff subtending genes belied a fairly keen intelligence. She had come to Europe after college to do her Wanderjahren numero and was writing a long anti-religious poem commissioned from her by the Budapest Free Thinkers Guild for its literary magazine. But her efforts so far hadn't done the job, not atheistic enough. The managing editor had inveighed against the president of Christ. After all, Philo and Josephus Flavius never mentioned him, but they're both Jews, of course, and anyway, every Eastern religion boasts of some immaculate conception or other. Now get to work. I couldn't help being mildly irritated by Brittany's silly accent, with all the vowels shifted back and down, as she told her little tale, but tried hard to keep a poker face just the same. Suddenly a middle-aged stranger with an elongated torso, pointy ears, and a pencil mustache got up from his seat at the next table and asked whether he could join us. His left eye seemed darker than his right, and he was dressed in what looked like the sincere suits worn by Japanese salarymen. His speech was faintly foreign and cisatlantic, of the simpering sort one can hear any day of the week in the couloirs of the Courtauld or the Met. I couldn't help overhearing what you said about Christ, he said, and I'd like to become better acquainted with the American point of view on this subject. You're Americans, of course. Permit me to introduce myself. My name is Bolsatan. My inclination was to send him on his way, but Brittany pursed her collagened lips and sing-songed her assent before I had a chance to demur. You see, the topic of your learned discourse interests me mightily, explained the stranger sitting down between us. If I heard you correctly, you averred that Jesus never existed. You heard it right, Brittany replied. There's a whole raft of supposed sons of God preceding Jesus. The Phoenicians had their Adonis, the Phrygians their Attis, and the Persians their Mithras. To make a long story short, none of them really existed, including Jesus. And the coming of the Magi notwithstanding, it's all just a lot of fairy stories, or a bunch of hooey, as we say in America. Brittany was obviously just warming up. How can anyone with even a modicum of scientific knowledge believe in God? Religion isn't just the opiate of the people, it's a crock from beginning to end. And do you agree with your fellow American? Inquired the stranger, turning to me. I hate religion with a passion, I answered, trying to cut the discussion short. But the stranger was not to be deterred. Permit me to ask you, he resumed after a pregnant pause, are you perhaps acquainted with the proofs of God's existence? Absolutely, retorted Brittany. And since you've mentioned the subject, you must know that there are 5 traditional proofs, plus a 6th, that Kant cooked up even after asserting that there was no such thing as a proof of God's existence, and demolishing the first 5. As long as we're on the Germans, I chimed in, you must know that Schiller said only a slave mentality could countenance Kant's reasoning, and Strauss simply laughed it out of court. Well, but what troubles me, responded the stranger with a wisp of a smile, is this. If God doesn't exist, then who rules over the lives of men? And more generally, who designs the Bauplan of life on earth? Man is the architect of his own fate, answered Brittany sententiously, for which I silently applauded her unexpected adherence to traditional lexis. Oh, that won't do at all, was the stranger's quick reply. How is it possible for man to be the sole governor of his fate if he cannot plan for even the next day? A man might even trip and fall under a streetcar. Just then there was a loud screeching sound as a streetcar rounded the edge of the square and came to a sudden stop. A crowd quickly gathered in front of it. The 3 of us stood up and craned our necks to see. Somebody yelled out in Hungarian that a man had been run over and decapitated.